Hi everyone and welcome to Launch in Rare Diseases Best Practices for Pharma. Rare disease launches are different for one reason. You don't get many shots. You might only reach a target physicians once or twice a year. So if you wait until launch mode, you're already late. Today, we'll focus on what winning teams do pre-launch, how they build scientific credibility, design an editorial and omnichannel strategy that actually holds together, and how they align medical, commercial, marketing, market access, and patient teams around one backbone. I'm Daniela Clapp, founder and CEO at Expert Medical Education, the first EACCME accredited medical education app. We help pharma teams turn accredited education into launch readiness, engaging the right HCPs early, generating actionable signals, and measuring impact. And I'm joined today by Madelene and Philippe, two people I've been looking forward to learning from. Madelene, over to you first. Please introduce yourself to our audience today.
Thank you so much, Daniela. So I'm Madelene Borgvall. I have more or less 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industries, essentially in marketing positions and commercial leadership. I have been working on global positions, but also on local over that time. I have been focusing the last 7-8 years really on rare diseases, launches, but also in oncology and hematology. And my specialty is really launching, brand strategy, commercial excellence. I'm also passionate about change management and transforming the system. And I have lately been focusing a lot as well on doing the change management, moving into an omnichannel approach while launching product in rare diseases. So happy to be here today and to have the discussion. So over to you, Philippe.
Hey everyone, great to meet you all and see you here with so many people on the webinar. My name is Philippe Wiet. I'm the founder of a very small agency called Shyft. And I've been in Omnichannel, I think, for 10 to 15 years now, really focusing on pharma and biotechs. And I think over the past years, I've been involved in 8 launches, going from specialty care to rare disease. And my specific niche is actually that I help US biotechs cross the ocean to Europe, where I set them up from scratch. So I do the thing called Omnichannel from scratch, where you have nothing and just a green field to start from. And that's a very interesting opportunity. So here to share some of my experiences, and I will be wearing the more engagement side, having that engagement side of the conversation with me.
Well, thank you both for being here today. Quick note to everyone listening, the chat is open, drop your questions as we go, and we'll keep a dedicated moment at the end to treat your questions. Now, let's go straight, let's say, into the most important part, strategy. Because in rare diseases, the constraint is brutal. Small audience, low frequency, very little margin for error. If you start thinking launch 6 months before, you're just reacting. So here is the question that sets the foundation for everything else today. When does a successful rare disease launch really begin? Madelene, from your perspective, what do the best teams do early that most teams simply don't do?
So I would actually talk a little bit about my experience is that what has been done in the different companies joining in is everyone is working in silos. So it's really to align upfront and make sure as well that what are you doing from the brand plan perspective and that there is actually only one strategy. So I think that sometimes everyone is working in silos. You need to align upfront, making sure that you have the same brand strategy, and then you're pulling it down into the tactics and the execution. So I would say align upfront, make sure that everyone is on the same page, because in the end there is one ambition. You need to get the product out to the patients because they are on high unmet needs in this treatment. So I think that's important.
Perfect. Philippe, I want to bring you in now. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Madelene said, right? I think there's a timing piece. When is the ideal time to come in? And there's of course this markers, 2 years, 18 months, I think is a critical one to start getting those teams up and running. But from an omni-channel point of view, what I see, if I link it back to this timing, where most of the time we're involved pretty late. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. First of all, we are seen more as a tactical partner, help us switch on the tactics and get us a little bit of presence out there. I think that's one of the reasons. The other reason is, in most of the companies, the omni-channel person sits in commercial excellence and therefore has as a very important role to play with the commercial team, but he's not seen as a partner for the medical team. And I think this is probably also while during pre-launch, quite ahead of time of launch, and this person is not always involved, and certainly not by the medical team. So I think that's linked for us to the timing for sure. It's a key element. So ideally, you give the omni-channel guy a call 18 months ahead and involve him at that strategic level already.
Perfect. Okay, so we talked about timing. So ideally, this critical window a year and a half now before. But let's be practical. If a team is preparing a rare disease launch today, what should they prioritize in this window, the first 12 to 18 months?
I'll maybe build on a few things that I said in the previous conversation. I think, as I said, right, we're most of the time we're pulled in on a tactical level. For me, what is really from that timing 18 months ahead is when you bring in an omni-channel person, that person needs to take the role of a solutions architect. The first question that I actually always ask to people is, when you have a rare disease launch or any launch, basically, what are the challenges you have when going to that market? And that can be, I need to educate my audience because that disease is not well understood. But sometimes it can also be we have an issue with finding patients. We have an issue with our patient journey where patients are underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So there's an issue with the referral pathway, or there's any other obstacles for patients along that journey. So for us to understand that insight space, that landscape, but also the ongoing narrative, right, from a competition, this is, I think, where the conversation should start. And then asking, what are the challenges, but also opportunities that arise? And some of these opportunities might be, look, we have a really well-established Congress ecosystem. We have a really well-established scientific community where we can find those HCPs treating the patients. So I think that label of omni-channel person is a solutions architect, and that person should find potential solutions on our strategic challenges, those strategic imperatives. That's where that conversation needs to start. It's the origin of that conversation, and not talking about the tactics channels yet, but this is where it starts. So I think this also means that if you launch brand A in rare disease and brand B in rare disease or specialty care, that omni-channel approach is never the same. There's not a similar engagement strategy for all of these, right? So it's really, really specific. And I think the other part, and I already gave a glimpse of that, is the role of medical. And I'm super enthusiastic of working with the medical teams. It's 80-90% of my time. But I think they have a significant potential of growing closer to omni-channel and engagement, and starting to see also that besides their critical role of engaging with KOLs, leading the congresses, and doing the ad boards, and that really specific medical affairs work, they also need to start to embrace that they play a role in capturing consent, driving that engagement beyond the pure MSL interactions, and making sure they sit closely together with this omni-channel leads to amplify their message, making their message better heard in a different way, and also focusing on reach. Because most of the medical teams have, very, very limited resources. They have a few MSLs. And then the question is, if we have these challenges, if you educate such a big group, or if you need to tackle from that audience pyramid a very big group of referrers or HCPs that play a role in diagnosing, it's a significant amount of work. And in pre-launch, they can see the success for a great launch. So for me, it's a call to the medical team saying, sit down with this omni-channel team from the beginning, involve them in the strategic thinking, why you need to do certain things in pre-launch, and let them partner with you. So that's really a very critical piece for me.
Thank you, Philip. What about you,
So,
Madeline?
yeah, can I add in on that? I think that you're right that we're talking about the ecosystem. And I think that, the medical side that has also that's something to play in the pre-launch stage because they're communicating to the HCPs. But I would also add in patient engagement because in rare diseases, patients going to ask for the treatment and they have a lot of knowledge. So I would also say to drive those activities early on as well, that the communication that you're driving out from the patient perspective, it has to be consistent to what you're actually doing to the physicians. So upfront to really stakeholder engagement, if it's going to be the KOLs or if it's going to be HCPs, but also what it's about the patients. And I think that it's also, even if coming to market access, we need to talk about disease awareness. So very upfront, I would really say, is it going to be 18 months? Is it going to be 24? I think that everyone starts late. So this is like, it has to be a marathon. It cannot be a sprint because sprint is going to be the 6 months before. So launching a product should be a marathon that, you have this consistency. But start early up front, definitely, and do the full ecosystem, putting everyone around the table. And I do agree, Flip, that the omnichannel person always comes along very late, and it's not even part of the strategy. So which means that you have the strategy and you're just pulling out the tactics and say, this is what I'm asking as a budget because I'm putting out a lot of tactics. But does it actually really fit into the strategy?
Yeah.
So definitely.
Yeah, and it's true, Madeline, where in some cases that role is really seen as somebody that says, what are the channel preferences and where do we need to kind of push that message? But I'm also talking to the peers and the people that are working internally in the pharma and biotechs to elevate that role, to have a seat at the table when we talk about strategy. And I think it's not basically, I'm not fully honest in saying we need medical to reach out to the omni-channel lead. We also need that omni-channel lead to grow towards that, in that direction, and to also be open and to be talking to that medical team. It's also a different conversation talking with a medical team than with a commercial team, which is probably a bit more of the comfort zone. But there's this, it's like a medical paradox, right? In pre-launch, they really have so much, they have the relationship, they have the access to HCPs, KOLs. They also have the scientific content, which is critical, of course, in rare disease. While commercial in pre-launch is in our European region, is so limited to what they can do, right? But if I then look at budget spread, I see a lot of this omni-channel engagement budget sitting on the commercial, basically waiting to be used during launch. And the medical team has not kind of foreseen this. And I do think, and Danielle, on medical education, they do see this and they do see the need, but they don't stretch that thinking to, okay, but how do we engage at scale? How do we reach beyond my MSL population, beyond the I would say the core capabilities and the core activities that medical is doing today?
Exactly. If you let me zoom out for a moment now from the medical education side, I think this is exactly where I see the difference between teams that launch and teams that really build adoption on a strategic level. So in rare diseases, pre-launch is where you build this scientific readiness in a very small group of physicians. And that's why medical affairs should lead the pre-launch engagement backbone, not just support it. And we talk a lot about that in our previous conversation. And here's the shift I'm seeing, that the most advanced team use education pre-launch not just anymore to inform, but to build the community that will really receive the launch, more than just the KOLs, as you were saying. So to generate also data, signals, consent, and we'll talk about that, that can actually be leveraged for the launch. So who is engaging, how deeply, what questions keep coming up, where confidence is low, and what gaps still exist, for example. And a very important strategic asset for the launch is this opt-in, the nominative data sharing to help build and or expand the database of HCPs, and to build also these personalized journeys afterwards with these insights. So this is absolutely critical right now in the industry to accelerate and to be successful at launch. And we see more than, because the trend was 6 months before, so we're too late, we already talked about that. Now it's more really 1 year or even more before, and this is where we can really make that difference. So this signal pre-launch, well, then are useful when the launch is here, and they can fit the priorities, the sequencing, the cross-functional decisions, so you don't end up with a fragmented, let's say, HCP experience, no? So we talked about strategy, and I think it was already setting the scene. We already have some questions from the audience about channels, so we'll move in a second about the channels. In fact, it's our third part, so please stick with us, because the second part will be more about content, no? So if strategy is the backbone, as we said, what holds it together, no, in practice? So the next question, and this is where a lot of teams, I think, get stuck, is what holds that strategy together across all the different functions, no, and all the different touch points. And both of you have strong views on this, so let's talk about content. Why do so many launch teams still focus on channels before defining the message they want to deliver?
I mean, thank you so much, Jenny. I think it's a very good question, because normally you build a brand plan and then you're asking for budget and you need to have the tactics, and that's about it, what you put in the brand plan. And I think the missing point is really that what is the editorial planning? What do you actually want to say over the year? I think from the medical perspective and commercial, we know the clinical trials that's going to be published. We know the data that's going to come out. So you can do a planning from January to December. And then how do we actually disseminate the data? Because it's always a matter of repeat as well. When you want to go for reach and frequency, how many times do you need to repeat the content? That at least 7 times before they actually kind of acknowledge it. So there is a need to build a plan of an editorial planning, that what you want to communicate over January, February, March, and then what's this kind of campaign that you do that, you know, April, May, and June. So I think that it's really important to build up the plan, what you want to do, and then to split it. Pre-launch stage it's going to be a lot about the medical team, and they also might have some market shaping activities and disease awareness that has to be pulled out. And I think that if you're in the rare disease area, you might have some competitors, so you still need to create a space for market shaping. So there is a lot to be done before actually choosing the tactics. And then pulling down, for sure, you're going to have the tactics, and is this going to be a webinar? Is it going to be, you know, this and this? What is the tactic? Is this going to be more appropriate for a Viva approved email? Is it going to be more appropriate for a Congress? So then it's coming down also to who is actually doing it, but at least align on it up front to make sure that you have the editorial plan in your brand plan, if it's coming from medical, commercial, or marketing, but also patient engagement, that everyone is aligned on it. And then you're pulling it down, actually breaking down to what are the tactics. So I think that unfortunately, we're only asking for budget because we have pulled in a lot of tactics, and then we're like, okay, whatever, which are going to check what's going to come. But I think that we need to think a little bit earlier, that you say, what do we want to say first? And in the end, otherwise you're going to have that, you know, oh, we are supposed to do X numbers of Viva approved email. We're just changing the subject, and we're not really working on the content. What is the story flow we want to do? And always, as I said, that, you know, whenever you have physician buying in and so on and understanding the concept, it's because you have a very nice storytelling. So how do you build up the storytelling? You cannot say everything in the first email. How do you building it up? And how do you link the different tactics afterwards? That the first piece of the storytelling is at the Congress. Then afterwards, you're going to have a webinar. Then afterwards, it's going to be a Viva improvement. So you're really building in the omnichannel approach so you can drive and have all this insight in the CRM system. So I think that it's crucial today to say content is really going to say what is the tactics you're going to use afterwards. So I think this is a key point.
Philippe?
Yeah, I think I love what Madelene is saying. And for me, if I look throughout my career of the past 15 years, that focus on content is something that I didn't start off with, to be honest. I think as many people I start off with, you know, really focusing on that experience and engagement design. But you know what I realized, and we've all seen these big slides where you do subway maps, like, oh, I see the physician, I send an email, I do the, and it's just like a subway map, super complex. But then you realize, guys, putting this on a slide and finding out channel preference or what works with a KOL audience is different than with other HCPs, etc. But all of a sudden you realize that you cannot do this without the content piece. It's one of the biggest elements. The same thing when you start talking about personalization, content volume becomes a very big item. So fully agree. There's this kind of very natural, organic flow, which starts from I get the insights, I start talking about the strategic imperatives, what is important for us for launch, and then we build a narrative. And when I think about content, for me, there's three levels. There is narrative, the story. Then there is the master content pieces, the big chunks of content. And in a lot of companies, this is still the PowerPoints for the MSL, or there's like maybe a webinar deck. And then there is the third layer, formats, and these are some of the transactional pieces, right? I see a physician, I talk about MOD, I talk about burden of illness. Then there's an email, and that email brings us somewhere, right? But these assets, email, these connectors, or some of these landing pages, they derive from that big chunk of master content. So demystifying that word content into storytelling, which is a very easy topic to sit down with a team and saying, look, if we talk about KOLs, if we talk about treating HCPs, if we talk about diagnosing or referring, but because there is this always same audience structure, who are we talking to? And the narrative with treating physicians is slightly different, of course, than with people that play a referring role. How you should educate with KOLs on the disease, that's very different, of course, right? These guys know the disease in many cases better than us. So this is, I think, personalization start with building that audience pyramid, global KOLs, local KOLs, then the people that play a role in treating, people play a role in diagnosing. Sometimes it can be the same, and then the referrers, and then mapping out that storyline for both. Do we have the same challenges with all of them? And probably, 18 months or 24 months out, it's not that you focus immediately on all of these layers, right? You start with that, what Madelene said early on, you start with really having that KOL, and that's the deep scientific conversation, learning, having that exchange. This is where it starts. And then I think building that narrative, and only then we go into content. I see a lot of the things where people start talking about content, but then afterwards they want us to personalize, but they completely miss that first step. If your narrative is not personalized, is not tailored in storytelling, then we cannot bring it back at the end. And then, of course, you build that content, and then there's the phrase that is for a marketer key: you go where your audience is, right? You need to be where your audience is, and this can be on own channels, this can be on own web if you have that access. But in many elements, if you bring a new treatment to the market, you enter sometimes a new therapeutic area with zero consent, with limited reach. And this is, of course, where you also need to broaden your view because of that reach and limited consent, but also because from a credibility point of view. And also because you don't maybe have the bandwidth to orchestrate everything. And this is where I built a diversified third-party approach. This is where I look into with partners who have the reach in this specific HCP profile from that audience pyramid, and that can really help. And sometimes the driver is because I need extra hands, and sometimes the driver is because I need to amplify a certain message, and I need just also the reach, because if you start from a very low percent, it's not that easy. So I think that's for me important. And once you've built then that, only then with its content and narrative, only then you talk towards the more classic omnichannel pieces, like what is then the engagement strategy, and how you engage with KOLs is in a lot of cases informal. It's relationship based. You're not gonna send these guys every 2 weeks a newsletter. That would kill the relationship. So you need to tailor that engagement model based on that audience, with who they are, the typology of that type of target group. So I think this is where you start nuancing very much that engagement part.
Perhaps just to add one point as well is that the funny thing is that we say, you want to personalize and be very close, that, what is the consumption of content that we're using, but we're not pulling it down to the CRM system. So we're not really collecting all the analytics. And I think that often this is where you come to a pain point as well, that the CRM system, what do we actually push in the CRM system, that we're linking those different activities. And I think that this is also why Omnichannel, linking all the different aspects together, helps us to get the analytics to really make sure that we do the right, whenever you need to do a decision taking and so on, why are you doing this and this? But you cannot do it if you don't have the metrics.
Yeah.
And this is something I see quite often.
And I think, Madelene, when I look pragmatic, right? Because there's an ideal world of guys, we need to personalize, etc. If I build this audience pyramid and we end up with KOLs treating, diagnosing, referring, and that referring base in some rare diseases, this can be very big, right? The entry point of patients, how they come in, it's GP, and then maybe they wander around before they actually find their treatment. And for some rare diseases, this can be years where people are misdiagnosed or finding. So this also means that this audience pyramid, the KOL range, as we said, this might be slightly narrower, but that base can be high volume. And I think we need to be honest here, CRM usage, I'll talk about medical in pre-launch, is very, very low because from a compliance point of view, it's not a commercial conversation, it's not needed. So in a lot of spaces, we're still running congresses with Excel, and we're still doing very limited CRM. So it's all great when we talk about HEP 360, while the reality of that pre-launch state is challenging on that element. So I think we need to stay pragmatic on the reality of consumption of platforms by the medical team, and the discipline there. And I think the other reality check we need to bring to ourselves is the ability to execute, because you can do this segmentation where you say, okay, who are we talking to and what's their level of understanding of the disease, and commercial will then do an adoption funnel. But then you end up with a matrix, and I see some companies working with 16 and 20 of these boxes with unable to actually run this from an engagement point of view. So I would rather start small and limited with saying, what can we execute, and build your engagement ambition based on what you're able to run, and not to build some dreaming set with an insights company where you end up with all of these conservative people, innovating people, and then not having the content library or the ability to orchestrate, because that's really challenging.
Can I just add in one point as well? So I would say that this is also why it's so important to have the omnichannel person on board early on, because what we saw, and I mean, what I've seen in my experience is that everyone wants to put out their tactics. And then in the same week, there is going to be a webinar. They're going to receive the physician, a Viva approved email and so on. And in the end, they're going to say, well, this is from the company. So they don't see if it's medical or if it's commercial and so on. They're like, okay, this week I've received 3 emails from your side. And then it's quiet. They don't hear anything for a month. So I think also that when it comes to the tactic, they also need to be set. What do we want to say? But when do we say it? And to who do we say it? So there is a listing as well that you can say that, do we push out this day? Because it's the same that, Tuesday and Thursday are the best whenever you want to push some content out. And in that case, are we sure that it's not concomitant at another activities in the company? So they are not overloaded 1 week, and then it's kind of no noise for a long time. So I think that consistency in the communication is like a seamless communications that you have over the time. So they don't see who is actually interacting, if it's medical or commercial and so on, but really they see the company is interacting.
Yeah, no, and I think that what you just said, right, is how can we align on our orchestration or be aware amongst those two teams? In all honesty, it's not that easy. It's not that easy. Of course, it needs to happen at a country level, because some of the frameworks we discussed, that's maybe a different topic, is something you prepare above market and then you localize this blueprint of audience, narrative, etc. All of this you can very well with locks and with markets prepare above market so that they have something to start from. But I think what you just said is the challenge of orchestrating, because it can happen that an HEP is being targeted on Monday by medical and on Tuesday by commercial, and that it indeed it's one company. They just see the label. I mean, I think there's been a lot of studies also on if HEPs actually know the difference if it was a medical rep or somebody in commercial, and they don't. They actually don't see that. They don't see the difference. So our structure and our organization is not actually how we are being perceived or how we show up in front of an HEP. So I think really critical to have the right pacing and the right spread in that orchestration. Good remark.
Okay, well, we have a question regarding content, so maybe we can tackle it. If you could go back to 18 months pre-launch, what's the one thing you'd start earlier from a content perspective? Do you have any cases or stories?
Shall I start?
Yeah.
I think that what's done and so on in my previous experience is really working on disease awareness and market shaping activities. So in the space, sometimes you have a lot of competitors, even in the rare diseases. And I think that if you want to have the right positioning afterwards, when it comes to branded material, there is a lot of things that you need to communicate upfront as well to make sure that you're really owning this market shaping activities, that you're really owning this space before bringing on the positioning and the product. One good thing is also to have the KOLs on board. Whenever you do this activity, does it resonate to them that, you know, this market shaping activity? So you have the buy-in. And this is something we were doing as well. So they will actually talk about this positioning of the product before it's actually coming the branded version. So I would say this is important as really to start up front. Market shaping activities, make sure that you nail that space out that you want to do. And then you can really easily come on when you have the more branded part and positioning of the product. So it's really about unbranded disease awareness before the brand is coming.
Yeah. No, I think key, what you just said. And I just want to ask, I mean, reflecting on this, of course, it's if I would put the strategic imperatives of the past launches that I've done next to each other, they're basically, they all come down to the same. So, and it really, there's so many similarities. Right? It's about educating on our pipeline, about who we are. It's about the burden of illness, unmet need, etc., etc. Everything depends on what type of launch you're doing, and you need to be very honest with yourself. Are we launching a Me Too product? Are we launching the next kind of new treatment with everybody's gonna want? Because I'll be honest, in the recent months and years, I've been involved in launches in immunology where we basically are not differentiating between the two products that just launched before us, and the market is already crowded. And the other one is you're bringing something to the market where people are really waiting for it. You are the next best thing, and people are actually asking already to use your drug. Those two things are, you need to be very honest with yourself, because in this noisy market, people have educated the market. If you're going to come in with the same approach that if you're doing this unique blockbuster launch, it's very, very different. And I have the feeling that where people are always a bit too dreamy when they start doing this content production, that's one. And the second part is we still communicate a lot about what we want to say. And now what I see now, insights companies that are really becoming pretty powerful of mapping online conversations, basically social listening on steroids, right? Where we can really see what is the ongoing conversation, what is happening in Converse, what is happening on social publications. For me, the next best thing is to build a content factory, not about let's augment and re-amplify with AI what we want to talk about, but combining those two, and to really build a live insights driven content factory. Because I think that possibility is becoming pretty close now, where you can actually say, okay, let's listen to the space in pre-launch, and during those moments we'll build the content about the questions that are being asked. And I think it was Madelene or Danielle said, like, you need to listen to the questions that are being asked at these early touch points. So capturing these questions that you're getting at Congress, the reflections of HCPs, the reflections of KOLs, and turning that into content. We still work in the heartbeat, right? We do a publication, let's do it. This is what we want to talk about, let's do it. It's still very much on that push. And I think that's, for me, the evolution, becoming far out, building that content supply chain and the strategy about which content do we want to bring. And it comes down to this cliche about HEP centricity, but still in content, it's so easy to say, this is what we want to say, what we want to bring, and not tying it back to insights.
Well, I will add a perspective also on my side, now from the education side. Well, this is also, so content is king, but this is also where we often see the gap, because teams arrive wanting education, this awareness, but without a real content briefing, no? Or this editorial backbone that we said is so important. So in the end, from a provider perspective, we end up building something scientifically correct, but strategically disconnected, from brand, from what you're amplifying, from what medical is saying at congresses, and from what the field is reinforcing. And that's how education becomes another silo. So I think also this is important. But yes, now that we covered strategy and content, let's move to the next layer, channels. And we know we have already some questions regarding channels and how third-party education and actionable signals can scale, the reach and feed these launch decisions that we talked about. So here's what we're seeing on Expeer, and then I will give you also the floor, Madeline and Philip. But yes, the shift in the industry, what's changing now, I would say, is that the industry is beginning to treat continuing medical education as a strategic lever for launch readiness, not an isolated medical activity, so it's a good sign. And in practice, that means basically two moves. The first is building the right audience. 1 year, 1 year and a half before the launch, the goal isn't just to educate, it's also to identify and develop this community that will matter at launch. And the second is turning those pre-launch education signals into actionable intelligence. And this only works if consent and data integration are built into the design also from day one. So this is also something that must be taken into account for channels. And I prepared a little slide just to have an example, but this is a case I like because we see the performance of such strategy on one of our channels on Expeer. But what was most interesting was not just the initial impact, but the continuity of the program. Over time, and we'll see another slide after, we were able to observe how the community evolved, how engagement was maintained, and how adoption was sustained. And so if we see the growth on the other side, on the other slide, sorry, can you put the other slide, please? Well, this one, yes. We see this measurable impact, when you look at the evolution. This is not a one-off initiative. It's the transition from a pilot or an isolated campaign to a consolidated educational ecosystem. With sustained growth over time, with projections also showing continued expansion, let's say, in both the number of professionals reached and also the accredited outputs, because we issue official diplomas, so it means that the knowledge is getting to the right audience. And this is really where the value lies, because at that point you are no longer running campaigns. And what is good also, because consent is at the core of everything now, is that when you provide this content that is truly valuable, accredited if possible, we see that 90% of HCPs opt in to receive more information from the sponsor, the industry. So that opt-in is not a checkbox anymore, it's really the first step in building a trusted relationship. What do you think about that, Philippe or Madeline? Third-party channels, data, tell me.
For me, go ahead, Madeline, go.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I have been doing in the past as well, and I think it's interesting, but I'm always a very analytic person. So I want to understand as well, and also, when you sell it to the top management, that, if you want to drive this, how can you make sure that when it's coming down to the analytics that, you're really targeting your physicians? Because this is what is going to be in the end. So do you have any examples of that, or how is it working?
Yes, the technology here helps. First of all, we talked about this nominative data sharing system, so you can not only know who watched the video, but really all the analytics and the behavior, the questions they ask, and where they fell at the exam, etc. So it gives you this intelligence. And there are new techniques also that coming from the database of the industry directly, so we can match, let's say, both database with some techniques called hashing or this kind of thing. I'm not the technical person, but we can make sure that we are targeting now the doctors that really matter. So all this is gaining traction amongst the industry, and the technology is helping a lot.
No, so from my point of view, working with third parties, especially in pre-launch, is key. But before jumping into that, I want to step back in other challenges, right? Because one of the key elements that I would say as a marketer, I'm gonna say independent of medical, of commercial, is in pre-launch, you need to go from unidentified to identified traffic. So in pre-launch, our websites are ungated. Most of the disease awareness pieces are ungated, and this gets easy access, but we like about identifying those HCP. Therefore, an HCP portal where people need to log in and we can track on an individual level is interesting. This also means that you need to have certain tactics that identify your HCPs. This can be scanning at a booth. This can be organizing a webinar where people need to log in. I'm Philip, I'm Madeline. These things help. So some of the things that we just discussed, you drive certain tactics because this is where your audience is showing up, because this matches really good where your content. But there's also tactical drivers that you take a decision on because it's a need for your data strategy. It's a need to capture consent. So those have a different origin. Somebody from medical will not per se, or from commercial, say, oh, we need to do this because I need to identify. These are more tactical views that come from the engagement lead. In the same way, when you have low consent, for example, I'm doing a launch now where a company is going into a new therapeutic area, zero consent. We also, that's one challenge. The second challenge is that the accreditation is still a very interesting value proposition, right? And that you need to educate. And in launch, there is so much to do. So I see a lot. I mean, we work together, right, Daniela? So I see a lot of people where it's interesting to work with a company like yourself because you have the extra hands, with the small teams, like we said. But then also to have the reach, because if you're new to the therapeutic area, you don't know the ecosystem, you're not recognized, etc. And I still see some teams that say, oh, I want to do everything myself, they because we want to keep them on our own channels. I want to. So you need to take a strategic decision where to work with third parties, because reach is a bigger strategic importance tactic. And then is, how can I get them from third party to my own channels? And I saw a question popping up on, do we still need websites, or how big do they need to be? Yes, we still need them, right? We need to still disseminate the storytelling on disease awareness, and it can happen with third party, but there needs to be a reference, a go-to destination on our end. But I think throughout the years, we've built massive HCP portals that sometimes brought some disappointments in the industry because nobody was showing up or coming back. It's all about sizing those website destinations. In rare disease, you don't need to spend 300, 400K on a medical destination. I mean, a lot of this can be smaller and more integrated into engagement strategy. How I build websites these days is I built the journeys. I'm meeting a physician. I'm following up by email. It goes somewhere. Three steps. And all of these things where I say it goes somewhere, it's a landing page where you broaden on burden of illness, MOD. I built first all these journeys, and then I add up all of the landing pages, and they become my website with, of course, some additional functionalities. But then it's already integrated into the flow of engagement, and not doing the reverse engineering. Let's build a website and then, oh, let's see how we get people there. That's I think what is critical. But coming back, because I'm mixing topics now, coming back to your point of view, critical for me pre-launch, being open to making sure what do I do self versus where do I seek help, and understanding why you do this. That's, I think, super important.
Good. Well, we have lots of questions regarding channel. Madeline, you wanted to say something?
I was having another question as well when it was coming to engagement, because I think that this was also said by Philippe, how do you want to engage? And I think that, from my experience and what I'll be doing some light and also some deep engagement. But I know that how I was working, in the past, and I was doing it. So how do you define the light engagement and deep engagement on your side?
Very good question, and this is really also a trending topic. So for me, light engagement is really these impressions and clicks. No, this is the basic, and yes, it's obviously give you some hints, but we go more and more towards really measuring other things like performance, which is for me the highest level, at least that we measure on Expert, which correspond to what is called more level 5. So it's just how you measure performance in a medical education setting. So what we see is that basically we measure, so first the time spent, how much of the message are they consuming, no? So for me, it's an important KPI. Then we do pre and post testing about how they come to a course or a live webinar and how they end up after. So we see also this knowledge increase, no? That's also very important. And then and going back to the slides I showed you, so when we have programs where we have more than one activities, the repeat rate is also very important. And then if you have more than 2 activities, then you can measure this performance with more level 5, I was saying. And this is really, really where you can demonstrate impact. And I know that budget constraint, and we have some questions regarding budget too. So if you give management this kind of very good KPI, very deep engagement KPIs, I think it's really demonstrating impact. And most of the medical teams now are struggling with that. No? So I think for me, this is what is deep engagement. But yes, I don't know if I answered you, Madelene.
Good.
Okay.
It answered the question.
Well, I think we'll answer also some of the questions regarding channels, because I'm not surprised. I mean, with strategy, content, and channels is popping with lots of questions. So let's go there. Considering your experience, which are the best channels to increase disease awareness prior to launch?
So I'm coming back a little bit to what Philippe said. I think it depends on how many competitors do you actually have in the area. So I think that you need to understand where do you sit in the market space, how many competitors do you have, and how eager are they to kind of consume the content. So I think that it really depends on the therapeutic area that you have. One answer will not be fitting everyone. What I think that you always need to have, and coming back to Philippe as well, is a backbone in the communication. And I would say a hub. There is a hub, resource hub, that you're always coming back to, that you always post in the content. But besides that, it's difficult to say, which is the best channel. I think that you need to pull down some analytics and so on. I think that there are some classical ones that should always be used, but you always need to put them all together that, if you're using a Viva approved email, if there is a webinar, how do I put it afterwards? And where you're ending up on the resource hub, and the resource hub should have a kind of hard access. So you always have denominated data, and then you can measure what is the content consumption afterwards. So I would say that the best channels are the ones that are connected. I don't know what you say, Philippe, or would you want to add in on that?
I think for sure when you have MSL access, that's definitely the element to play, right? But I think a key one also as a really accelerator for launch is still Congress, because it gives you such an opportunity. And the challenge with rare disease is sometimes these congresses are not every year, right? They every 2 years, so it's not always that easy. So I think for me, Congress is a very interesting one, because you have so much which you can leverage. First of all, you have your KOLs that you can reach out. You can meet them face to face. You have your symposia. You have your scientific exchange which is happening there. And then there's, of course, everything on post follow-up, basically seeing Congress as a massive touch point, with multiple touch points from symposium to booth to KOL meetings, but then also the follow-up, right? The challenge in our industry, again, if you have these big global congresses, there's a global congress team, which is sometimes different from a regional team or the local team, and connecting what is happening at these global congresses, especially in Europe, capturing consent for multiple markets, which is not an easy thing, right? If a German physician comes, it's a double opt-in. If a French one comes, it's something else. So integrating that global congress strategy with local bridging with MSLs, who was at the booth, who was at the symposium, who was a highly engaged HCP, and why did this one HCP only come to our booth but did not go to the symposium? If you want to have this thinking about a congress, I think for me it's still key. So I think that's definitely for me high on the list, because also if you look at the budget lines, pre-launch Congress is one of the most heavy ones. It's a significant amount of budget. you have 20 people involved, 10 months out. But what we pull out of it, the ROI, the return on that engagement, is, I think there's still a lot of progress to make there. So I think for me, it's the one go-to destination, especially with a small team. You find a lot of HCPs in one spot. So for me, it's also the scale of that connection. But then you need to have this depth, right? What you just said, Madeline, you need to then flip it from to a very personalized follow-up. So it's not one or the other. It's putting that systematic thinking on, okay, this is where I start. This is the analytics I capture at Congress, and this is, do I then follow up with a webinar? So I identify again, maybe if I miss some people, and then I follow up one-on-one to get, a very better understanding of that HCP and where he sits on that disease awareness or that education level.
But Philippe, I still think that we see a lot that you're using congresses more or less like a one shot, whilst it should be part of the strategy that you do before, during, and after. And I think it's excellent results that you're going to get from congresses with new data coming out, and also reusing out afterwards, that perhaps we're not leveraging it enough. And what are we doing? As you said, everyone cannot go into congresses. How can you leverage it to make sure that the ones that are not turning up can really get the information? So I would say that, putting on congresses into an omnichannel approach, really disseminating in the maximum.
Yeah. And this is where I said the reality is not that easy, because if you do tomorrow a congress in Europe and it's a major conference, like things like EULAR or ESMO, most of those are led by a global team. So they really have different drivers. And also, if you flip back 5-10 years, Congress was more of a logistic challenge. It was about booking the hotel rooms and doing so that opportunity is not fully leveraged. There's so much growth, but it's really, if you then have a global team that is willing to work with a local engagement or regional engaging team, that's key. But I do not see global Congress teams basically leading that global Congress organization that have an OC guy in their midst. They need to work with the regional understanding of how would this work. So it's not pointing the obvious to its cross-functional collaboration, but it's also, what is the story that the omnichannel lead brings to that global team? Does he push the right buttons to get that buy-in, to saying, it might be interesting to work with me, because the countries would benefit from this, and this, and then we can continue the exchange. I think that's an important one.
It is, and talking about Congress, as it is such a strategic, obviously, piece now in as a channel, we see now a simple trend now from a regional perspective. So that's true, Philippe, not that much from global, but from regional perspective, that, for example, you have these publications at a Congress, and then what you can do is quite simple. You can just have 2-3 weeks after a live webinar with the leading KOLs of the papers, and then you disseminate not only to the people of the Congress, but obviously to the rest of the universe you're interested in, and then we put simply this on demand for the rest of the year, and you generate traction, and you translate, and you do campaigns locally. You have the onboarding of the local affiliates. So this definitely works, and will make I don't know, sometimes you can have 20 opt-ins, 100 opt-ins at a Congress, but you can have 1,000 with this kind of strategy. So it's really helping, and we're closing in a few minutes. So if you have a question, please ask right now in the chat. I had on my side one question for Philippe specifically. So we talked about everything, strategy, content, and channels. But where is the reality of our industry today? What is the maturity level of our industry in omnichannel?
And it's a few. Is it already a few months ago? I met Madelene at a very interesting congress, right, where some of the omnichannel nerds, come together once a year and huddle and kind of talk about how we're doing. And I started to do this throughout the years, this self-assessment, where I say, look, guys, we have maturity models, and every kind of consultant has his way of mapping maturities, right? But it's basically, you're still very channel centric. If I would pull up a tactical plan of a company and it says Germany tactical plan, it would say we're doing a webinar, we're doing an email, we're launching a new detail aid. And then you have companies that do it slightly better and that have this consistency of message. I think they really express what Madelene is saying. It's about key message. We want to do disease awareness, burden of illness, MOD, MOA, And we do this across a few different channels, but there's a consistency of message. That organizations see it as we are the bringers of a story, while the other one is we're trying to switch on channels. That's already an evolution. And then there's this gray zone where companies try to automate. They put in an operating model, a content factory, an operations team to do this consistency of message, maybe a little bit above market, but they have a systematic way of getting better organized. And then there's the last level, which is where people say, look, it's not about we bring the message. It's about really building that message strategy around that HEP. Where we go into high personalization, where we go into multiple orchestrations of narratives, because the same narrative at Dr. Madelene and Dr. Philip are at a different stage. It's not about being consistent to everybody. It's about having different campaigns at this personalization. Now, this is kind of the setup. And that last stage is the famous omnichannel, right? If I then map it with companies, the major majority are basically at the early stage, at channel. And I'm now starting to do this slightly different. I'm starting to do a diagnostic tool, but there's even a difference with the medical and the commercial teams, right? The medical teams are even at the stage about where did they see it as part of their role? Is it the medical team role to capture consent? Is it the medical team role to own and play a part in engagement? Because it's so easily labeled commercial. So they're even at the stage of, is this part of my mandate? And I think that's even at other states. So for me, that's the reality. But it's so exciting working in that pre-launch, because in a way it's also easy to do this at scale, because everybody is talking about disease awareness, and there's not differences in labels, or there's not everybody is in pre-launch state, and all of a sudden when your EU5 markets, they launch at a different time, and then you get a very heterogeneous region, right, at different speeds. So for me, it's still pre-launch. Establishing this is still the best place, and with medical. But as an industry, in all honesty, what we talk about at congresses and the reality of working with those teams, the gap is still big. So for me, it's being pragmatic about what we are able to execute, and not building castles in the sky or dreaming that this AI slot machine will give us all the answers. So I think that's really my day-to-day.
Cool. Madelene, a final word before we close?
No, I think this could be an ongoing discussion for a long time. I think that there is a lot of things to be done. Just to add a little bit on what Philip said, I think that there is people that really reinforce and also want to do the change management, because it takes time. Going from a kind of multi-channel into omni-channel takes time. So, doing it in 6 months is just not really working. So you need to expect the time. I would also say put in time milestones, what you want to achieve within 3 months, what you want to achieve 6 months, and so on. When are you expecting, and what is the vision of the company? And my suggestion would also be to have the top management. You always need to have someone in the top management supporting the change management, because then from the global perspective, going down to region and locally, this is going to be down. But you always need to push down as well to make sure that, the ones that are, you want to do something that you sit in your comfort zone, that you've always been doing for a long time. So yeah, change management, but also changing how do we actually rethink pre-launches.
Well, good last words. Thank you for that. I brought also a QR code, so if the team can bring that last slide, please, on the screen. So, Philippe, Madelene, this was exactly the conversation I was hoping it will be. So thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. For everyone watching, the recording will be available and we'll be sharing it with you. And you can scan this very important QR code to get a nice playbook with some related key insights. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.